And thank you for inviting me out here to talk about stuff that I'm very passionate about, which is sort of technology and how it impacts our world going forward. I use this title, Digital Manufacturing in a Non-Flat World, and I'm sure some of you will be, really? So what I want to talk a little bit about is sort of digital manufacturing. How do we tie what we do in IT into what we do in manufacturing? And the non-flat is not the floor in here or something like that. It's the idea that Freeman a number of years came up with the idea that we live in a flat world where the cost of transportation is so cheap that it doesn't matter where you manufacture it because we can transport it so fast. And my argument is that that might have been true 10 years ago. That's no longer valid. And so we're seeing some very interesting dynamics. So what I want to talk about is talk a little bit about what's your future world going to look like, what are some of the key factors that will impact it. Then I'll talk a little bit about what are some of the mega trends, what are some of the things that, whether we like it or not, it's going to happen anyway. And then there are some things that will be decisions points where we can decide, do we want to go one way or do we want to go the other way? And then I'll talk a little bit about what are some of the cool technology that will happen. And some of it, I'm sure, will be a little bit sort of yeah, he's a little bit nuts. That's okay. If I didn't get to that, then I didn't get far enough in terms of wowing you of some of the things that will happen in the future. So there are a number of people. I'm not the first one to sort of predict what will the world look like and where do I think this is going. There are some fairly recent reports that's talking about what are some of the new technologies coming out. Deloitte has some, but there's also some very famous people that have made some serious mistakes about prediction of the future. So when the first computer came out, Thomas Watson, the director of IBM, said the world market for computers is 5. And he was off by a little bit. The same thing, the guy from Compaq came up and said, nobody would ever want to have a computer in their home. That was when we had computers that were only good for Excel spreadsheets. And said, why would anybody want to have this in their home? And when the first cell phone came out, they said, this is only helpful for business people that are in sales. They were also a little bit off. So you always have to take these sort of predictions with a small grain of salt of how good are we really going to be at this. There's a very nice report from something called the Atlantic Council that's called Alternate Worlds. And it's called that because they really sort of, they got the mission from the State Department and said, what could the world look like 2035? And of course, the easy solution is that we know exactly what it's going to look like. And here is what it looks like. They chose the other and some said, we don't really know what the world looks like, but let's give you 5 different scenarios. So one scenario is, what if China became the next economic superpower and US lost? That's sort of one scenario. What if there was a civil war or civil unrest in China and suddenly China sort of fell apart? That would be another scenario. So it's all of these different scenarios that we can sort of play out and look at this. So if you have a hard time falling asleep tonight, you can download Alternate Worlds, and if you're lucky, you'll get to page 5. But it's a pretty good story about sort of what the world actually looks like. One of the things that is guaranteed that will happen out there is that we're going through significant aging over the next sort of foreseeable future. This is Japan, and what I'm talking about here is the dependency ratio. This is the number of people above 65 compared to the number of people below, or below per 100 people. And if you look at it, Japan will soon get to a point where there are as many people above 65 as below 65. That's one of the reasons why they are basically already here. If you look at it, we are around here. There are already 60 people for every 100 people in the workforce. That has significant impact on, there's less people in the workforce. There's a lot of people that are getting ready to retire and do something else. And one of the challenges there, if you look at Japan, is that typically the kids take care of their parents. There's going to be a lot of kids here that has to take care of their parents because there's going to be a lot of them that are going to be around. And of course, for that reason, you want to look at what is the impact of this on the workplace, on providing technology in the home, to make sure that you change your housing, So Japan is already in what we would call a super aging society. Here we're seeing Europe is sort of going after this. US is a little bit slower. Some of you would say, well, that's because of the healthcare system. No, the healthcare system might not be fantastic, but that's not the reason. The reason is that we have significant immigration. So a lot of young people, and most people move to the US at a young age, not at an old age. So because of this is a little bit slower. And then you're seeing China here. China is after this, but they're gonna catch up. They're gonna be just the same level of aging. So that's why you are now seeing the one child per family policy in China is really gonna kick in. And for that reason, you're starting to see changes in policy. You're starting people to really think about how can I do this. So one of the things that happens is that we are, at the same time, we're seeing people moving into, we're seeing significant urbanization. People are gonna be living in the cities. People are moving away from the countryside. They're all, so we're all seeing this, like Atlanta, big areas where people live together. It's much more attractive. It's not only here, we're seeing this in India, we're seeing this in China, we're seeing all this, that they're moving away from those, and that has a number of consequences for our infrastructure, on housing, on jobs, all of this. So we have to just take this as a fact. We will have this significant urbanization. The other thing that will happen is that the baby boomers will take over. The baby boomers will be the ones that, first of all, they are the ones that have most of the capital. So, and already now we're seeing that, or within the next 5 to 10 years, you will see that 50% of the population will be above 50. This has consequences for TV commercials. The big market is no longer college kids. It's going to be the above 50. So now we're starting to talk about diapers and all sorts of other things, not because we have kids, but for other reasons. So, so it's very important to think about this. This is going to have a serious impact on our society. These are people that have significant resources. So if you go to them and say, I'm sorry, we can't help you, they're just going to say, okay, what's it going to cost me? And that will play into how we do things. So, a lot of them will not want to get to a managed care facility. They would rather use technology and other things to be able to stay in their homes. So this has a deep impact on a lot of the things that we do. Some of the megatrends we'll see that's kicking in right now, one of them is one-off personalized products. And you're still saying, yeah, right, he put up a Jaguar. Why? Very few of us drive Jaguars. That's not the reason. Jaguar was put up here because it's one of the simplest cars we have. It's only available in 1 million different configurations. So if you go in on your website and said, I want it in brown, with teak interior, with leather seats, once you count all of those up, it's about 1 million different configurations. That makes it very hard to produce these products. If you go to something like GM, they have 10 to the 20 something different car configurations. That makes it very hard to manufacture them because we all want something that's our product. I want it with my layout, Marie, my significant other, said, no, I need it in red and it has to have all these other features. How do we manage this? This makes our manufacturing much, much harder because we all want sort of things that are, and the ultimate thing is, we will soon get to where you get earbuds that are fully personalized. This is a pair of earbuds. They fit perfectly to my ears. They won't fit your ears. That's an example of the type of products that we're getting out, that we all want this, that fits me, it's sort of centered around this, and we're building an entire economy around this. Most of you would pay $10 or $15 extra to get a pair of earbuds that's personalized to you. When we fly across the Atlantic, I put these in my ear, and there can be a screaming kid on the next row. Couldn't care less because I can't hear them. So, for $15, that's a cheap price for that. So it's a very nice, so we're seeing this for these very nice products. The other area where we're seeing very significant progress is, of course, on getting food. The first problem is that we're running out of food. The second problem is that most of us would like to get high quality food. I would like to know, where was that tomato before it arrived at my dinner table? I would like to know, has it been gene modified? I would like to know, did it sit for an hour on the tarmac at Hartsfield-Jackson? Because then it might actually not be very good tomorrow. So I would rather have food that hasn't been there. I want to know who have touched it. This is an example, but we see this for, some are sensitive about Could there have been child labor involved in this? So all of this plays into how can we make sure that we get the right quality and the quality that we're willing to pay for. This is one of those. Another area where we're seeing significant impact is in electronics manufacturing. My cell phone probably has a lifetime of, well, I'm a techno freak, so it has less than a year. But most people will probably keep their cell phone for about a year or a year and a half. But it implies that we have an enormous turnover of this technology. These were not built to last 18 months. They were built to last much longer. The other problem is that the manufacturing system was designed to have a much longer life. So if you go out and you build an electronics factory, like Apple is right now building the factory for the iPhone 7, it's built to last 10 years. The problem is that nobody's going to buy an iPhone 7 10 years from now. It's going to be for the museums at most. It's very hard to build these systems so that you can capitalize them over 18 months. So one of the big challenges is because we crave new technology all the time, these are actually expensive to do. So we need to think about how can we build factories that is much more reprogrammable, that can sort of do one-offs. And of course, one of the revolutions to get to this is 3D printing. We get to where we can do this we could print weapons, but also you can print all sorts of other things. But it's really about we getting to a place where we can almost do manufacturing on the fly. You order it, we will make it. And a long-term vision is a UPS truck arrives at your door and they said, what did you order yesterday? And they print it in the back of the truck and they give it to you. Now the factory is in the back of your truck. It's no longer somewhere in China or someplace. So we're seeing agile manufacturing coming in at a very high speed to be able to give us, these are printed on a 3D printer, but there's all sorts of product that we can get. We will also get this, for instance, for doing personalized medicine. We're already now getting to the point where if you wanted, for instance, to have a knee replacement, we can make a knee that's similar to your knee. Today, if you go into a hospital and you get your knees replaced, you'll get one of 14 different knees. All the companies basically have 14 different knees, so they'll go out and say, okay, you're a size 7. And then you'll get a size 7 whether you like it or not. We're getting to the point where we can use medical imaging and other things to basically get a model of your knee. We can sort of touch it up so that it still looks like a better version of the knee you have right now, and then we can operate it in. We will 3D print it in the basement overnight, and tomorrow you get fully personalized knee. So you will see this. Right now we can do this for knees and hips. Very soon, within the next 20 years, you will get personalized organs. We can make organs that fits what you have today. It's going to be really cool. I want an upgrade, I want to be a 2.0. One of the things that also impacts this seriously is salaries. So the good news is that we can get cheap salaries in Mexico, and if you live in Switzerland, you better figure out how to make a lot of money every hour to be productive. So we see that there's a significant, the good news is the US is sort of in the middle. The really good news for us is that Chinese salaries have gone up 350% over the last decade. 10 years ago, it's a no-brainer you were going to do your manufacturing in China. Today, that is no longer true because the salaries have gone up. So today, down here, it was sort of a factor of 10 in salary difference. Today, it's only a factor of 3. For that reason, we're going to see China either going to automate to compete with us, or they're no longer going to make our stuff. So, there's a good reason why Lenovo opens factories in North Carolina. It's a good reason why Apple is making their Mac Pro in Texas. It's a good reason why if you bought a Moto X phone, they were all made in Texas. They were no longer made in China. So we're seeing this because it's too expensive, it's not the same quality. So we're seeing all of this manufacturing either coming back or going to low-wage countries like Malaysia, Vietnam, other places to do this, which is very, the good news is that China no longer sets the agenda on its own. And the good news is that we're starting to see manufacturing coming back. So one of the questions also when we start building factories is, of course, we have a lot of people that enter the factory floor. What is the one skill set that most young kids have today? Computing. Okay, that was one. Sure. You're onto the right track. I was trying to look for something a little bit more specific.
Game playing.
You got it. The average American plays 140 hours of computer games every year. Some of you are picking up my slack. I don't play games at all. But the average American plays half an hour every day. The average 20-year-old American male has played 12,000 hours of computer games. The average 20-year-old American male. That's 3 years with no sleep. So that makes them an expert. So if I could design a manufacturing system that looks like this, they would be instant experts. I would be completely useless, I would be, the red button is for what? And it was like, so we actually did this. We actually designed a system, a manufacturing system, and I went out and we used exactly, one of these. And I was trying to explain to the kid and say, I think the yellow button is just like, give it to me. And, he went off and I was like, damn. So that's what you see, that if I could design something that looked like this, they would already have trained the last 20 years for on-job performance. Who cares about me? I'm too old for this, So great, throw him away for this. But for the young kids, so that's one of the things we will see. We will see that we'll try and leverage much more the skill set the young people have that are actually entering the workforce. And of course, we can also start to make educational games so you can actually learn something while you're playing these games. And we can make it sort of fun to actually have real educational skills. So that's pretty cool. So the other thing we're seeing is, of course, we're seeing tremendous progress on interesting new technologies. So I was, as John mentioned, I was fortunate enough when I came here 8 years ago, my dean said, you're going to be successful as long as you double your budget every 5 years. As long as you bring in twice as much money every 5 years, you do it good. And I'm like, okay, how do I do that? And I said, well, okay, I could try and steal from the other universities. That would not make me very popular. Or I said, well, I could try and grow the pie. So instead I said, let me grow the pie. So we actually wrote a national strategy for where do we think robotics and technology is going to go the next 15 years. And I was fortunate enough to get to present this to the US Congress. And while I was at Congress, I got a phone call from the White House, and they said, you're in the right city, you're in the wrong building. I said, okay, so I said, I can pop over, it won't be much of a hassle. So I popped over, and they got very excited about this, and that led to President Obama launching something called the National Manufacturing Initiative, which is getting it's a really big effort on trying to do this. And that was up 2009, so 2013 we updated it for a new one. So I'll talk a little bit about one of the things, what's coming out. So what we really look for, what are the economic drivers for the companies? And almost all companies, if you go and say, what would be a differentiator to you? The first thing that will come out of their mouth is money. If I can make more money, the rest of it we can figure out. But if we don't make more money, it's going to be not so nice. So it's cost, it's quality, it's speed, and it's being able to find a way where we can have more automation. Same thing for small and medium-sized companies, and also in logistics and warehousing. That then led to, there's a number of gaps. If they know how to do this, the next question is, why are you not doing it today? That's an IQ test. If you know what to do and you haven't done it, really? And then they will come up with all sorts of excuses. So these were the excuses, and then we came back and said, okay, this is what we have to do to be able to solve this so that they can be more successful. And I'm not going to talk through this, but one of the things we're typically seeing is that where you use automation, it looks like this. So what's wrong with this picture?
No people.
There's no people, exactly. And it's a little bit boring. So the good news is that, and that's primarily because these robots are heavy duty, they're dangerous, they're not very good. So what can we do? Well, the good news is I have friends. So these are two of the robots we built at Georgia Tech. This is Simon. Oops. This is Simon. It's really cute. So it's very simple to talk to. And this is Curio. Simon, we sort of basically he would be like a mate that you would have on your factory line, and you would be able to actually interact with him. Say, could you go and get this for me? You can go this. Curio, we're right now teaching Curio to cook. So the idea is that, let's assume that I wanted to get some pasta bolognese. And then I would be in the kitchen. I would say, okay, I'm going to have to chop some tomatoes. I'm going to have to chop some mushrooms. And I have to get some noodles. And so, okay, let me start by chopping the tomatoes. And then Curio will say, I know the recipe for pasta bolognese. Let me scoop up, get the mushrooms. And by the time I'm ready with chopping the tomatoes, he'll say, here you go, here are the mushrooms. So how can I have the perfect assistant that would sort of all the time work with me so we can share this? So this is like Marie and I in the kitchen, you know. She's a little better cook than I am, but, you know, nonetheless, I can be the assistant, you know. I can be Curio and she can be the cook. But nonetheless, you know, we can use this to how can we get assistance? This can be applied in the workplace. It can also be applied in a medical scenario where you would go up to people and say, have you taken your medication today? Have you, you know, how do we make sure that you do the things that you're supposed to be doing? So we can use these robots. They're cute enough. It has even colored ears, so it'll get red ears when it's embarrassed. It's very easy for us to understand these simple social cues to do this. So that's one of the areas we're going into. The other area where we're clearly seeing is we're going into green manufacturing. Even though the US is sort of slow to get there, the rest of the world is slowly realizing that if we don't do something about green manufacturing, we could be in for a surprise. So for that reason, you're seeing this as being one of the big business drivers. If you go to the large multinational companies, they all have an environmental policy for how can we do all of this and do it in a way so that we're also trying to be environmentally neutral. If you haven't gone, I would encourage you to go down to the Georgia company Interface. They're about 20 miles down 85. They're one of the first carpet companies, and this could be, no, I don't think this is Interface carpet. Interface carpet is typically, you can see it's sort of small tiles. So about 15 years ago, the CEO said, it would be cool if we could go from being an environmental disaster to be environmentally neutral by 2020. And the first thing that happened is that if you put down this carpet, for instance, you used to use a lot of glue, which would imply that when they put down this carpet, they would say, don't go in there for a day, it's not healthy. And then they said, well, you know, we're putting down these tiles. What if we could just put glue in the corner? So they saved 95% of the glue. That's good for business. And they took away a significant amount of the environmental impact. And then he looked at Novo or one of these science programs and said, you know what? We have these animals that can climb up walls, and they can do geckos, and, you know, they can do this without glue. Can't I have a carpet that can do the same thing where I can put together pads and no glue and it would still work? So he put together a small research team. They developed the equivalent of Velcro. So now you put together your carpet using Velcro rather than using glue. Now you have no environmental impact from this. And that was sort of their step one. And they've now continued to go down that road. Today, Interface is environmentally neutral. So they've gone from being somebody that strong pollutant to doing this. If you buy an Interface carpet, you've already paid to have it recycled. That's a pretty big deal. And that's what we're seeing. These companies are coming in, they're using this technology to also make sure that we actually get a much lower environmental impact. Another area where we're seeing this is, of course, in alternative fuel vehicles. Now we finally have a sexy environmental fuel vehicle. When they showed up first, you know, with a Toyota, and they said you could buy one of these. I drive a Porsche, you know. I looked at them and said, and I could still drive my Porsche. Now, you know, I would think about it. This is a sexy car. Sorry?
Is your Porsche black?
Yep.
You left your glasses on top of your car outside.
No, that's not mine.
Some sunglasses?
Nope.
And a pseudo Porsche out there?
So it's not mine. Could be Marie's. Oh, thanks. So, but it's an. So Marie, you might have left your glasses on. Well, we'll see if they're still there. But this is a pretty cool car. It's environmentally friendly. One of the things that's sort of a game changer for this car is that it's built in California. California, you have the highest hourly salaries of anywhere in the US. So Elon Musk basically said, I want this sexy car, I want to be able to do this, but I have to be able to manufacture it in California. So he went away from the million options of the car and said, no, you can't have all of these options. Instead, he basically said, let me design it so it's very easy to manufacture. Normally, for a good car factory, we would say that there's 10 workers for every one robot. So when we say it's a fully automated factory, there's still 10 workers for every one robot. So the fact that we sort of say people-less factories, not so much. There's still 90% people and 10% robots. For the Tesla factory, we're at 25% robots and 75% people. So he went much further in doing this, and by doing this, he can still manufacture this in the state of the US where we have the highest salaries, and he can compete with doing this in China, which is very cool. It's a really cool factory. If you get a chance, you should go see it. We talked about before, we're seeing these standard factories, no people in there. I should mention before I said this, if we look at the car factory, we've automated the plate shop. This is where you take sort of a large sheet of aluminum, you put it in a press, and you sort of, and then we have a chassis. There, you really don't want people in there. It's a lot of power. It's not very nice to be there. It's really dangerous. The next shop you see is this shop. This is the welding shop. There are no people there. So, and then we get into the paint shop. There are no people there. Once we pass beyond the paint shop, there are no robots. And that's because now we get to the mass customization. You want different audio systems, different seats, all sorts of things. That is where we can't use the robots yet. So that's one there. We are trying to get there in terms of doing a much higher degree of using sort of digital informatics. I'll come back and talk about this in a minute, of how we can use this information to optimize our plane. One of the other areas that I've been sort of intimately engaged with myself is in terms of aerospace manufacturing. Boeing has a problem that most of us would like to have. Their lock is filled for the next 7 years. So if you win the lottery and you decide, you know what, I want a 737 to fly around in. The good news is you might have the money to buy a 737. The bad news is you can take delivery 6-7 years from now. You'll probably be bored and buy something else meanwhile. So because of that, Boeing would like to get to a place where they can do this much faster than they can today. Already today, Boeing makes 32 aircrafts a month. It's almost 2 a day. We worked with them on introducing robot technology so that by 2017, they will be at 72 aircrafts a month. 72 aircrafts a month. That will bring their backlog down to about 4.5 years. Every one of these airplanes is $100 million. So that implies that I just helped Boeing generate another $4 billion a month. So, so giving me a little bit of money to have fun in the lab is really peanuts, It'll be the first 5 rows of an airplane. So, who cares? So it's really, for them to come to us and say, we really need help. Even if I asked them for 100 million, it wouldn't really be a big deal. I haven't tried that yet. But here we're using robots. So they have the same number of people they had before, but they have doubled the manufacturing volume. And there, it's cost and it's quality and it's speed that it all comes down to. Can we do it faster? Can we do it? And for some of this, it's actually not very nice working positions. So taking them out where you have significant economic problems really makes a lot of sense. Another area where we're seeing this is what is called the Internet of Things. Soon, everything in the world will basically have an internet address, and we can track it over time, whether it's your thermostat at home, whether it's things that you buy in your grocery store. We can also, whether it's buildings, energy, your home, healthcare, we can more or less build it all together. And that will have huge benefits for us to be able to optimize it. Of course, it also has huge risks, because if we're not careful about security, very soon, already today, when you go to Amazon and you do a search, all the commercials will show up on the side, and they're very easily sort of customized to you to make sure. We will see this to a much higher degree. We'll see this all the way up to IT networks. There's basically, we're seeing this also in the industry world, where you can go from having machines to factories to fleets, to networks. So you can really have it from the factory floor to the boardroom. So already today you're seeing this, that companies like Delta have the possibility of knowing when do they have to do predictive maintenance on their engines. They can do this, when should this plane go in? They can do this on the fleet. They can optimize it. What plane should we have in Seattle? What plane should we have in Atlanta? All the way up to what should we have in Asia, Europe, and all of these places. So we can do all of this optimization. We can do the same thing for fleet management if you're in logistics. So it's really, the good news is we can do much better logistics, much better optimization. So far, the finance sector has used a lot of information to try and really optimize down to sort of the minute level of how we can do this. We've seen it in real estate and rental. You really know how much you can take, you can charge for houses. You can go to Zillow or whatever and figure out what are the last 5 houses that's been sold in my neighborhood. So we're seeing this to be able to make much more educated choices. And of course, we're seeing it in retail. They're tracking all the time to know exactly where things are. Manufacturing is one of those areas that has a huge potential, but it hasn't really been penetrated yet. And of course, there are other areas like construction. You're seeing, the government also has a low potential, but it's not really been used. Well, look at Congress, and you would know that, I'm not sure they can type a keyboard. So there's clearly some opportunities to go in and look at this, but manufacturing is one of them, and we're seeing also professional services in other areas where we haven't really penetrated yet. We're starting to see use of the cloud. Some of you will have on your phone where you can go in and you can basically do a Google search on whatever you're trying to look for. You can take a picture. If you haven't tried this, you should do this the next time you're at a restaurant. Whenever we go to a restaurant and we have a nice glass of red wine, I'll take a picture of the bottle and it will tell me where's the nearest place I can buy this bottle, what's the retail price. Now I know how much it was marked up in the restaurant. Good to know. And so they screwed me. Good to know. And at the same time, it will give you sort of a wine review. Okay, I bought a cheap wine. Okay, I better, cover it up with something else. Good to know. But we can get to this where we can do this, and you can basically go and get a lot of information directly through image-based searches. And the way it works is basically, it'll take this picture. It's not because you have a really smart phone. It'll send it off to Google. They will use their cloud to be able to do very fast recognition, and it will send you the results back, which is very, very nice. Google has also something called the 3D warehouse. If you buy furniture at IKEA, the good news is that Google has a model for all furniture you can buy at an IKEA store. And you can actually go and then do your home decoration at home before you go to the IKEA store and do this. Because all of these models, and these models are made by regular people that put them out there. So I was like, yeah, okay, they're really crappy models, Turns out they're amazing models. So clearly there are people that have a lot of time on their hands. They don't know what to do. So they design furniture and put it up on Google's warehouse. Next time you have to redecorate, you can actually leverage this. This is only the start. So you're going to see this for all of these new products that are coming out, which is very cool. Another area where we'll see this come in is clearly in supply chain. So the reason why we've seen so much interest in trying to do things in supply chain is because manufacturing grows 8 to 10% a year. Supply chain or e-commerce grows 40% a year. So if you have to make an investment, you should make it in e-commerce and not in sort of traditional manufacturing. So this also implies that there's a lot of interest from some new players in here. So you look at this warehouse and say, well, that's a pretty good warehouse, right? What's wrong with this warehouse? First of all, there are no people. But what else is wrong with this warehouse?
The aisles appear to be too small.
Sorry?
The aisles appear to be too small between.
You think they're too small? I think they're too large, 80% or 60% of the space in this warehouse is air. If I owned real estate, I would be smiling, because I'm wasting all of this. So what if I could take away all the aisle space? What if I could do this? Now, this is, a small company that today is owned by Amazon called Kiva came up with a concept and said, what if I could change the warehouse? So in this warehouse, if you have to go and do picking for a grocery store or anything like that, you would basically have to go down the aisles and pick all of these places. What if I could take that away? What if I could put you at the end of the aisle and all the groceries came to you instead? So now you just have to stand and do picking rather than. Normally, if you walk up on this, if you're good, you can probably do 60 picks an hour or something like that for larger items. If you do sort of tote picking, you can do higher, but still, there's a significant walking involved in this. What if I could automate this? So I said this would be a really nice concept. The nice thing is that if I do this, I can also take away most of the space that's in the aisles. All the space went away. This is an Amazon warehouse. So now, these guys are picking, but all the shelves are coming to them. They stand still and all the shelves move around. So they've sort of turned the warehouse upside down and said, why would you not do that? And now it also implies that I can now reorganize the shelves. If I know on Fridays you buy napkins and stuff like that, and on Monday you buy toilet paper, great. I can actually connect into my statistics and use this to be able to do this much better than I could before. I can reorganize it. I know, all of the stuff that I use for Christmas. I'm not going to use it anytime soon. I can drive it to the back of the warehouse if I still have it in the warehouse. So basically, by doing this, you can increase the efficiency of the workers at least by 100%. And at the same time, for simple Kiva warehouses, you can reduce the density of packaging by 100%. From a real estate point of view or from sort of a capital point of view, this is a lot of money. Suddenly you saved a lot of money. And of course, these people now have a much higher efficiency than they had before. So there's a good reason why the people that came up with these orange robots was bought up by Amazon, and they got 700 million. So, they smiled all the way to the bank. We are now seeing this being optimized, So how could this be improved? Right. Could make the shelving taller, or you could build multiple stories. So same concept. Basically multiple stories where you would have small robots zipping around doing all of this. So right now there's a company in Boston, Symbotics, they're doing this 10 stories high. So they suddenly took a warehouse outside of New York in something called Newburgh, New York. They increased their storage volume by 400%. And right now, all of the people are sort of at one end, which really sort of makes a huge difference. The ones that they've built, their robots drive up and down the hallways at 30 miles an hour. You don't want people in there when you drive these small zippers up and down at 30 miles an hour. So it's pretty amazing technology that you can actually do to do this. So it's very nice. The other area where we're seeing this is that we're starting to get autonomously flying vehicles. 40% of all pilots entering the US military today become drone operators. They no longer fly airplanes. These airplanes, when we were in Iraq and Afghanistan, with a big mission, we had 15,000 flying vehicles in theater. That's a lot of flying vehicles. We're slowly seeing that these will be used. So the prediction is that by 2020, coast to coast and transoceanic air freight will no longer have pilots in the airplane. Now, if you look at it, last week I flew to Wichita, Kansas, and you can imagine the pilot takes off, then he spends 2 hours playing Angry Birds, and then he lands the airplane. He could spend his 2 hours with Angry Birds actually flying other airplanes. So if I can take the pilot out of the airplane, put him on the ground, I can now have him manage a fleet of these rather than just a single airplane. He can go home to his family after 8 hours. He doesn't have to be stuck in Wichita, Kansas or some other place. For the military, if we shoot down an airplane, we don't lose a pilot, we only lose a machine. For air freight, I no longer have to have the same cabin pressure. I don't have to have a restroom on board. I don't need to so it's all of these things. I can beat cheaper airplanes, and I can improve the efficiency of the airplane of the pilots. So this is a no-brainer. UPS, FedEx, DHL have all put in orders for drone-operated airplanes. As soon as we get the legal framework in place, which is happening right now, this is going to be a really big deal. You can do this much cheaper. At the same time, if you look at it, one of my good friends, actually one of the Kiva guys, did sort of a back-of-the-envelope calculation and said, isn't this going to be more expensive? No, it's going to cost 20% of regular UPS delivery today. 20%. This is a pretty big deal. Another area, of course, you're seeing is that if you follow sort of the technology, then you will have seen that Google has invested tremendously in new technology the last few years. They've also done some crazy experiments. So this is a crazy experiment. Google Shopping Express. If you live in San Francisco today, you can call up Google and say, I would like to get a pair of sneakers on South Street, size 8, the green ones. They will drive a guy to 8th Street, go into the store, buy you a pair of sneakers, deliver them to your door at no markup. At no markup. So the CEO of Walmart called me and said, you know what, I think they have a brain fart in San Francisco. You know, there's something wrong with these people. So why did Google do this? Right now, Google is losing 8% of its advertising revenue to Amazon. Because if you're going to go and buy something, you're going to go straight to Amazon and do your customer research and figure out, you do your customer reviews, and then you buy it there. That implies that in the old days where you did your Google searches to figure out what's the best product, Google doesn't get a cut anymore. And if you look at what 8% of Google's advertising revenue is, we're talking real money here. So for that reason, they are basically doing data gathering. They're doing this for free to figure out where are the business opportunities, and then they will slowly go in to do this. One of the things both Amazon and Google is going after is that they would like to be able to do regional sort of UAV delivery, where they basically drive out a truck and have 16 of these on board, and then they will soup out and do all of these deliveries. And then you can do this much faster with much less people. They're, of course, trying to get to the point where it would be nice by the time you press the buy button at Amazon, somebody knocks on the door and says, you ordered this. So we're trying to get to how close can we get to have this. Already today, in large metropolitan areas, Amazon has something called Amazon Fresh. You can order groceries from Amazon by 10 a.m., by 4 p.m., or whenever you get home, they will be at your doorstep. In my neighborhood, they might not be at your neighborhood. They might not be at your stairs by the time you get home. But you know, in many other neighborhoods, that would be okay, or we'll find a way of getting it delivered. So this is a pretty big deal. We want to get to these deliveries. One of the ways this is going to happen is that we're going to start to get autonomously driving cars that will do these deliveries so that we can zip it around. So Google is going into this for several different reasons. One of them is clearly to do logistics. Recently, I had a chance to sit down with one of the CEOs from GM. Their prediction is that by 2020, intramodal logistics will be driverless. You know, so if you were a truck driver today, start thinking about an education. You know, it's not a good thing to do. They all basically go, I'm surprised they say 2020 from GM. My own prediction is that kids born today will never drive a car. And that seems to be a fairly robust sort of prediction on, well, be 15 years from now, nobody will be driving a car. They'll have to drag me out of my Porsche, but you know, for the rest of the people, it will be like having an Uber with no driver. So, you know, you don't, it's more if you look at it, you know, I have a car, I probably drive it 2% of the time or 1% of the time or less than that. What if I didn't have to make that investment? What if I could, for the much cheaper price, get something that would show up at my home, take me to work. I don't have to pay for parking anymore. I'll just say bye, you know, and then 5 hours later or 8 hours later, I'll call it, you know, time to go home. Car will show up. On the, you know, on the weekends when I want to go and impress my lady, I'll say, we need a Porsche today. You know, when I need to go to Home Depot, I want a truck. So, you know, what if I can order this and I don't have to make that investment? That's a pretty big deal. That's why Google already now is starting to deliver cars on testing in San Francisco that has no steering wheel. You can't drive it, you know, there is no steering wheel. So this is going to come out very soon. My prediction is still it's going to be 10 to 15 years out. But very soon you will see this. This is going to be really cool. It will also save you a lot of money. You don't have to invest it in a car anymore. Because if you look at it, if you sit down with your Excel sheet and look at it, this is in general a really lousy investment. So I have to wrap up, But I wanted to mention last that one of the last areas where we will see tremendous progress on this is, of course, on these massive open courses that I'm sure you've all at least heard about. So we have one of the experiments at Georgia Tech where it's an open course. The only requirement we have is that you can't show up on campus. We'll give you a cheaper education, but you can't show up on campus. We don't want you to show up even for graduation. We'll mail you the certificate. But it will be the same certificate. So we right now have a master's at Georgia Tech in computer science. If you show up on campus, we'll charge you $50,000 for the master's. If you don't show up on campus, but you take it through open education, it will cost you $7,000. So, and it's purely an online course. You take it online. It's the same quality. We've spent a lot of time trying to do sort of the quality guarantee to make sure if you get a degree from Georgia Tech, it's the same degree whether you get it through the open or through this. One of the interesting things we saw primarily for graduate education is that 80% of the students we have that are graduate students at Georgia Tech are foreigners. And they're all somewhere in their 20s. Most of them are in their 20s. For the online courses, most of them are US citizens, or at least US residents. So 80% of them are from the US and 20% are foreigners. The age distribution is 13 to 80. Now, if you have a job, you can take this, more or less, you can take the class anytime you like without having to drive to campus, doing this online. So you can more or less take it at your own pace. That implies a lot of people that have a job can now do continuing education at a very modest cost and still get whatever their specialization is. You don't have to go to Georgia Tech. It would be any of the colleges. So this is going to be a pretty big deal going forward. The prediction for Georgia Tech is that we will, within the next few years, get to somewhere around 40,000 students that take online courses or take online degrees from Georgia Tech. And you'll see this all over the place. It's going to be very interesting. And it's more, the good news for US students is that the average lesson is 12 minutes. So saying if you can't present an idea in 12 minutes, they will never get it. So we spend a lot of time really understanding how can you do this. But it's very cool. It will open up for you can do continuing education. And the idea is with the sort of technology I've been showing you the last 45 minutes, it's going to be so fast-paced that you can make the assumption the day you graduate college is the last time you have to have education for the rest of your life. Gonna have to do upgrades all the time, whether it's in terms of technology, in terms of business models, in terms of whatever you need to basically get lifelong education. This will open up for having a very nice model for being able to do this. So that's really cool. Anyway, I promised John I would shut up in reasonable time. So really what I'm talking about here is that we will see manufacturing, see supply chain being radically sort of changed over the next 20 years. Fabrication will no longer just be in China, it will be everywhere. We'll get to these highly customized products like my earphones. I want ones that's just mine. It will be cheap enough that we can also be able to afford it. And it might be made very close to home, so it's no longer, because of this, transportation costs will be as expensive as manufacturing. That will imply that the home market will be much closer to where you are today. So supply chain will come into this. It will have a much bigger role than it has today. And finally, we will be able to do analytics to really understand everything that goes on so that we can optimize it in new ways rather than what you've seen before. And with that, I'll say thank you.
Very good. Okay, open for questions.
Sure.
The royalty.
Oh, thank you, I'm sorry.
No. Go for it, Yep.
Anybody else got a question? Let's take a picture.
Sure.
Where are people in this future world?
I'll give you two different answers, which is, so I think you will see them very much in terms of what we're taking away is the dirty, dull, and the dangerous. So repetitive jobs where you just do heavy lifting, gone. repetitive jobs where you just do the same thing over and over again, gone. And the dangerous jobs where we send out firefighters or we send out soldiers for removing improvised explosive devices, gone. All of that. So if you are unskilled labor today, I would strongly encourage you to get an education. All of these unskilled jobs are going to go away. And just to tell you, so I said firefighter in there, just to tell you how close we are to some of this. 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago, we had a terrible disaster in Japan, in Fukushima, where we had the tsunami and we had all of this. So the US government asked itself, if this had been the US, how would we have done? And the honest answer is, we don't know. So they said, okay, that's not an acceptable answer, let's see if we can do this. So they started a competition and said, can you build a robot type that would be able to solve the problems you saw in Fukushima? To solve this, the prototypical scenario is, can you build a machine that will be able to walk out of this building, get into a golf cart, drive a mile in Atlanta traffic, get out of the car, walk into a building, realize the door is locked, break through the wall, find a fire hose, and take out the fire. If you can do this, we'll pay you $2 million. That was the good news. The bad news is it's going to cost you more than $2 million to build one of these. Nonetheless, that competition is running right now. June 5th, 6th this year, the US government is going to have finals in California. And there are 20 teams that will be announced tomorrow that are competing in this. We think half of the teams will complete this mission. So we are at the level today where we can build this technology once we mass manufacture it relatively inexpensively, which would imply that things like firefighters, we can actually automate. But yeah, it's the places where you have creativity, where you do things that sort of require an education, purely sort of menial labor, gone.
Second part, have you ever seen the movie WALL-E?
Yeah.
That's where I'm seeing people.
But also there's Hero 6, the new one.
That's true.
So one of I'm always saying that Hollywood is my worst enemy, because they always talk about, the world will go amok unless, one of them will come in and sort of flip the switch and say, we're back to normal. It's like, yeah, right. Yep.
Okay, do you think those robots would ever be used in a human resource department?
So I think a lot of the early screening you're seeing of people will get fully automated. So I think there's a lot of this where we can do with data analytics where it actually doesn't need to be a person talking to a person. So I think you will actually see this. It's very interesting to me. One of them asked and said, what are the things that is most unlikely to be automated? And the question that we came up with is a hairdresser. Very few people would sort of go into a cabin and say, and then say, okay, we're done. It's a social experience. But there are clearly some of these social jobs that are very, very hard to automate. On the other hand, I just went through an immigration process, and trust me, all of the people in that department can get automated. It was unbelievable boring and unbelievable unintelligent. So for that reason, I would sort of say that there are a lot of these that we can actually get filtered out very quickly. So I think a lot of those, unfortunately, will go away.
Government workers.
Simon mentioned they had a debut on TV. Were you recently on TV with Simon?
Yep, we were. Yeah, it's been very popular in the media. So we're seeing this, and if you have, so we have an open house every year, second Wednesday in April, where we actually, so last year we had 600 people come and see what we do in terms of technology. It's pretty mind-boggling, some of the stuff that we do. Yep.
All right, so when robotics are considered, do you ever consider like the drawbacks, like when you say get rid of, like these are still people though, like there's people losing their jobs and still have families to provide for, Like it's not their fault that the world just passed by.
Absolutely. No, absolutely, but that's also why, absolutely. And so there is a very strong, so it's not, there is a very strong actually group of people that are involved in thinking about what are the ethical consequences of this. So, and the very important part of this is that's not only technologists. So it's very important that involves philosophers, priests, other people to, because where you look at sort of what are the human values and how do we make sure that we preserve them. So there is So you're absolutely right, and it's very important that we think about what is the flip side of this. So it is something that is being taken seriously. At the same time, I'm very happy when we don't have to send fighter pilots to Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm very happy if we don't have to put life at stake. So there are, and for instance, we just did some jobs we automated for the Peugeot factory in Paris, where people today is standing and doing very repetitive tasks. They basically ruin their shoulders and their elbows in a matter of 4 to 5 years. I'm happy that I'm not handicapping people, and I'm taking those jobs away because people shouldn't be doing that in the first place. But it's a fine line. I agree. Yep.
How about like security and like being susceptible to hackers and like
No.
happens all the time.
Big deal. So for that reason, we are one of the things that's being looked at very heavily is how do we make sure that computer security is a very important part. I'm sure you all heard about Stuxnet when some turbines in Iran went amok simply because they were being hacked. And we're very worried about what would happen if we hacked the electrical grid, where you could easily sort of have us basically run out of power. So it's not only just for the robotics part, but it's very much about the entire IT infrastructure we're building is very sensitive to hacking and to this. So we need to make sure that computer security is sort of a first-class citizen whenever we do this, which is a huge concern. And I'm very worried about if we look at something like the electrical grid, because I think that could, if that got hacked, we would be in some serious trouble for a long time.
One more.
Well, how well is the communication component? Because like, if you have people with different, accents that are speaking to these robots, like your response, how well do they communicate?
It's very good. We're getting to be where it's actually very good, where you can choose what language you talk to them in, whether it's Spanish, Portuguese, English. You can even modulate it. Is it going to be sort of northeastern English, or it's going to be southern, or so all of this is getting to where we can do this. But also we're getting to where it's much more than just spoken dialogue. We'll use gestures, we'll use facial expressions, so we can have our robots look angry, sad, frustrated, and you would immediately say that's a frustrated robot. So we're getting there in terms of having very good social communication with them.
But okay, so for instance, if the robots are in your human resource department and someone is calling over the phone, I mean, it's like
So
you have to repeat like 3 or 4 times,
Right. So I'm not necessarily saying most of these companies the way you do it. So I'll give you 2 different reasons for that. One of them is actually that our telephone channels are really bad in terms of actually communicating that. So and often it will be because of the telephone channel, not because of the spoken dialogue. The other is that most of these companies buy really cheap systems rather than sort of high fidelity systems. So it's very much. On the other hand, I've tried to call my insurance company, and by the number of times I press the button, I'm sort of ready to throw my phone at somebody afterwards. So I'm very happy when I get to where I can actually have a spoken dialogue rather than, and when I can say, what's your problem about? And you sort of say what your problem is, and it will pick up the words and say, oh, you need to talk to the following department, rather than me pressing 17 buttons to get there.
And then it says goodbye.
Yeah. Or it takes you back to where you've just been. I'm so late.
All right, we got it at the end of our program, so let's give a big hand for Henrik.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Now we got a good door prize, so I need your help here with this, all right?
Okay.
That's the only reason why they came.
Oh, that's why. John, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Next time I'm at your house, I'm gonna check the wine with my smartphone, and see what kind of level wine.
Uh-oh. Should never have told you that.
$2 shot.
Yeah.
All right, and I don't want
Okay.
glasses, but this one here is courtesy of the bookstore. They gave us some good stuff here, so we got an orange, whatever.
It says 42 at the end. 842.
842?
Wait.
Wait,
Wait.
is that you? You told me to wait, why should I wait? All right, so another one, we're gonna do another, this one you can see through what you're drinking.
Sometimes that's good news and sometimes that's bad news.
All right, so you should have told me to wait longer.
Okay. 828.
828? All right.
Hey.
All right, let's get something really cool. All right, we got a Pad folio, 5x7 says College of Business on it. You want one? Got a zipper on it and everything.
Sure, 831.
831.
We were all in the 800s, too.
There you go. We're in that cycle. All right, this one here is, I'm gonna say that before.
Oh, that's,
This one's a stick drive. Probably 1 gig, has the Clayton State on it.
815?
850.
815.
815. All right. Anybody want another one? We'll do another one. 1 gig, should be.
Okay, 810.
810. 810, gotta be here to win it. Too bad.
Oh, they walked out early. I'm sorry.
Alright. Where did you get one?
793.
Right.
It was a good row up there.
It is a good row up there, isn't it? I got a used pencil. Got a sharp point on it. You'll be grateful. Okay, this one here is, you had a little pad here, a little booklet pad with sticky notes on it. So it'll be good when you try to study.
792.
792. All right. All right, we'll do this one here. I don't know what this is. Oh, this one's a real.
What's that?
This one here is another one from the school. Has Clayton State logo on it.
822.
822. All right. All right. And then the last one is a College of Business mug. There you go.
816.
816. 816.
Yeah.
Hey.
Tell that number around mine.
You think you can get away with the pencil?
Pencil. It's a rubber pencil.
834. Somebody wants a pencil?
Everybody want a pencil? No. All right, well, thank
First
you very
come
much,
through.
everybody.
Thanks.